Hi everybody! In some of my recent videos, I've discussed why I think Spyro is coming in 2024, so I thought it was time I did my wish list for the game. Keep in mind, this is what I want the game to be. If you have a different viewpoint, that's totally fine, I can respect your opinion. So let's get to what I want this game to be.
Number 1.
One thing I really do not want this game to be is a return to the formula of the Legend of Spyro games that released from 2006 to 2008. Excluding Skylanders, those games basically meant we got no new Spyro content for a full decade between the time of the final game in that trilogy's release and the 2018 release of the Reignited Trilogy when it flew off store shelves.
I myself can guarantee I bought the game the second it was pre-orderable. It just went, yep, you're mine, screw this.
But to me, The Legend of Spyro was not a Spyro game. It was a 3D beat-em-up with a dragon skin and an attempt at a cinematic story, as it featured some big-name talents like Elijah Wood, Gary Oldman, David Spade, and other notable actors. Either way, I do not want this retconned fourth Spyro game to be like those games, because they're something else entirely. I can respect they were a lot of people's gateway into Spyro. Speaking of gateways, Spyro 2 was called Gateway to Glimmer in some regions. Looks like we're going to use a gateway to segue into my next point.
This is the second time I get bad jokes. Let's get on with it. I'm done.
Number 2.
Okay, my causing my editor to make fun of my bad jokes aside, we have to discuss this. I do not want any elements of Enter the Dragonfly's gameplay to fly into this title. I hated Enter the Dragonfly when I was 12, and it wasn't because I was about to become a douchey teenager. It was because that game f***ing sucked. Enter the Dragonfly was known for being notoriously broken. The performance was inconsistent and all around terrible. Also, there were very few levels and all of them were large and lifeless. That in and of itself was a bad thing. It's clear that Enter the Dragonfly was intended only as a cynical cash grab, as Spyro was so popular at the time, it was a license to print money. It'd be okay if there are small nods to Enter the Dragonfly, but seriously, this game, and the fact that dragonflies were more f***ing annoying to hunt down than the egg thieves from the first game.
I'll be honest, I don't remember the dragonflies, but the egg thieves, my god, they were such a bitch.
Okay, now that I've calmed down, let's get to what I do want this game to be. I want it to be a classic Spyro title with some free flight elements. I feel like Spyro maturing was one of the few good things about the Legend subseries, and with that came the ability of free flight in some later entries of that series. That is a cool idea. However, I feel like Spyro is best suited to large semi-open world platforming. Free flight circumvents that to a large extent, and that isn't a good thing as it kills the identity the series has. So what Spyro needs to do is straddle the line between being a large semi-open platformer and one that features free flight. Free flight would remove a lot of the platforming challenges and turn it into something else. However, if you have levels that are different from the flight levels in the first 3 titles, you can create something unique. You could even have an in-universe explanation for why Spyro is granted free flight in some of these levels. Maybe have it that the worlds have a lower gravity, and thus the glides of young dragons turn into limited flight. That's something that could be fun to play around with. You could even have heavier areas of gravity in those worlds for some traditional platforming challenges. Basically, free flight is a good idea, just in very limited quantities. This game needs to remain a Collect-a-Thon platformer. That is Spyro's identity, and there's nothing wrong with a good 3D Collect-a-Thon platformer. Take a look at A Hat in Time. That is widely considered one of the best games of the previous generation and an example of how to handle this genre of platformer in the modern era. This also brings me back to Crash Bandicoot to a degree. If you look at Crash's core identity, he's a linear corridor platformer with Collect-a-Thon elements. Take a look at the games that deviate from that formula. They're terrible. I'm going on another rant here, so bear with me.
Hey, can we get the swear down? I cannot keep up with how many glitches I gotta do in your video now.
Crash Twinsanity is the second worst thing to ever happen to Crash. The worst? The Bloody Mutant games. Just like the Legend of Spyro titles, they aren't Crash games. They're large, open-world 3D beat-em-ups with Collect-a-Thon Platformer elements. As a whole, that isn't a bad idea. But if you want to do that, do so as a new IP and create a new fanbase in the process, or hell, take existing characters and make that their spin-off game. Then you can benefit from a named IP and an established character whilst expanding the world. But making your main character something they're not is stupid, and it needs to stop. Rant aside, Spyro 4 needs to be a standard 3D Collect-a-Thon platformer if it wants to succeed, because the core fanbase don't like the Legend games, and kids these days don't have nostalgia for it, as they know Spyro in his classic formula.
Okay, that's what I'm gonna do like my father did to my brother. Which do you want? Liquid or solid soap?
With those points out of the way though, Spyro 4 will have to be innovative in some way. That is one thing platformers of the 90s did super well. They were constantly throwing in new ideas and new mechanics to keep things fresh. And while some are going to call me a boomer for this take, I stand by it. Spyro 4 is going to have to remain a traditional 3D Collect-a-Thon platformer, whilst also incorporating new ideas, and the way to do that is by doing what Insomniac did for Spyro 3, which is debatably the best or second best game in the franchise's history. I personally feel like it's the best one. But what do you think? Is it Spyro 2 or Spyro 3 that's the best game in the franchise? Let me know in the comments. Now, how would I innovate on the formula? I would innovate by introducing more friends for Spyro to make, though don't paywall them behind money bags all of the time. What you could do is borrow either from the Metroidvania handbook and make certain areas inaccessible until you have certain power-ups, or in this case friends. Or you could have it that you can do specific challenges within a level to unlock the new character. That would reward not only exploration and experimentation, but it'd really separate the wheat from the chaff. While Spyro has always been a less hardcore platformer than Crash, this would give the series an added level of difficulty, and it'd take a little bit more skill to 100% it. Anyways, those are just some of my ideas on what to do for Spyro 4. What would you like to see Activision do when they release this game? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. 2 of my previous videos will be popping up now. One's a video YouTube thinks you'll like, and the other is my video on why I think Spyro will make a return in 2024. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.